It was always the eyes that got me. Every other part of the human anatomy I mastered. Hands have become routine where my colleagues struggled. Complex movements and poses I can replicate without a model present. No matter how hard I try, though, I couldn't get the eyes right. The physical aspect of eyes I could draw with ease, but the problem was that when you looked at the eyes I made, they just looked flat. They never stared back at you as they should. They stare like the fake eyes on a paper they were. They've never really seen anything, no story to tell. The inability to draw true eyes was my biggest frustration. So when I received the call from a publisher asking me to draw a cover for an upcoming horror novel, my interest was piqued. I had drawn several fantasy covers before, but had never done horror. I took a call with the author that day so he could explain the book's premise and what he wanted. I honestly wasn't very interested in the plot, as it sounded like a typical Lovecraft-type story that never actually explains what the monster looks like. Maybe he was just bad at explaining it, and it's better in context. Either way, what really stood out to me was his idea for the cover art. I want you to draw the character looking straight at the reader with a terrified expression on his face. You can't see what he's looking at, but you can see the terror in his eyes. As soon as he mentioned the eyes being the focus, I accepted the job on the spot. I was given 2 months to work on the cover, a perfect sink or swim deadline for me. Either this would be the final push I needed to master eyes, or I would fail completely. I got to work right away and finished the image's background in a few days. The rest of the body was easy to draw, since the author described the character as extremely basic, so the audience could put themselves in the character's shoes, as he put it. While the rest of the picture was coming out well, I once again was struggling with the eyes. Every pair of eyes I drew on was fine, but just fine, and I wasn't taking fine anymore. It needed to be perfect. Weeks went by with no progress, several different eyes drawn and deleted, several references thrown out, and I was left with an eyeless face staring back at me from my computer. I actually began to panic, unsure of what I was doing wrong. In flipping back through my old references, I had discovered the problem. None of these eyes had seen real horror. You can't fake that horror that coats the backs of the eyes. It lingers there and doesn't leave. That was my problem. I was looking for truth in something that was a fabrication, something you can't fake. I needed eyes that had seen true terror, and I needed them quickly. I began my search for eyes that had seen terror on the internet. That road took me to see some terrible, shock sites just full of gore and other heinous things that I regret looking at now. I quickly learned that the eyes of the dead don't leave much behind. I needed to find someone alive who had seen true horror, and I needed to see them in person. I began looking for support groups in the local area. I know it might not have been the most tactful approach, but putting out a call for models who had gone through extreme trauma wouldn't have been much better. Besides, anyone who would have responded to an ad like that would probably be in a place in life where they've processed what they've seen and learned to live with it. I needed someone who relived what they saw daily, where the terror is still fresh in them. Lucky for me, there was an ongoing support group for survivors. I wasn't sure what they had survived, but I decided to take a chance and go. I would like to say I was nervous about going there and potentially exploiting someone else's tragedy for my art, but I would be lying. Walking up to the community center where the group met, I genuinely felt excited. I was even there early to help set up. I met with the organizer, an intentionally soft-spoken woman named Jo, who assured me I wouldn't have to share today if I didn't want to. As more people filed in, I did my best to go unnoticed. Unfortunately, everyone was so friendly that they went out of their way to welcome me when they arrived, all except one. A man in an oversized coat that could wrap completely around himself walked in, and upon seeing me, gave a simple smile and nod without making eye contact. The group took their places around the circle of chairs we had made, and Jo began the meeting. "It's good to see you all again. I hope you're all doing well," Jo said in a soft, motherly voice. "As you can see, we do have a new person joining us today. Would you like to introduce yourself?" I panicked at this moment and blurted out the first fake name I could think of. "Tobias," I said a bit too loudly. I still don't know why I did what I did next, but without anyone asking me to, I rose to my feet and started explaining the tragic backstory I had made up. I had compiled a few true crime documentaries and horror movies into one long, tragic story, just in case anyone asked why I was there. No one did, so I have no idea why I felt the need to spell it all out right there. Nevertheless, everyone was nice enough to clap at my story, and I sat back down, determined not to talk the rest of the night. Thank you for sharing your story with us, Tobias. I think we can all understand how daunting it can be to share your story with strangers, Joe said. A larger man stood up. Well, even though everyone else here knows my story, I don't mind telling it again for our new friend. The others in the group nodded in agreement, and Joe looked touched by the gesture. The next hour I spent listening to the group's backstories, one at a time, and to how they've been struggling to overcome their pasts. As bad as it is, I barely remember any of their stories, but I looked attentive as I took this time to stare each person in the eyes to see if they had what I was looking for. Unfortunately, none of them did. They all had intense pain, sadness, and rage in their eyes, but none of the true fear I was looking for. I was about to give up when the man in the oversized coat was the last person left to speak. "Philip?" Joe asked, already knowing the answer but hoping to be surprised, to which the man looked at her for only a brief moment before shaking his head and looking back down. Joe nodded and continued as if nothing happened. The meeting ended not long after that, with Joe noting she's proud of everyone today. As everyone was helping to put the chairs back, I walked up to Joe to ask why Philip was so quiet. "Some people take time to open up to others," she answered, trying to hide how rude she thought the question was. The rest of the group made great strides today in opening up to a stranger. "I think we should focus on that today. I wouldn't be too offended," the large man said after Joe walked away. "Phillips has been coming to these for months and nobody knows his story." "I don't even think Joe knows for sure." I nodded and made my way outside, even more intrigued by this mystery man in the big coat. Lucky for me, as soon as I walked out of the building, I saw the man in question smoking under a street lamp, with the beam shining down on him like a sign I needed to speak to this character. "Can I bum one of those?" I said, causing Philip to jump. "Sure," he responded, so quietly I could barely hear him. Philip pulled the pack and the lighter out of one of the many pockets on his coat and handed them to me. I took one out and lit it. I don't actually smoke, so I awkwardly held the lit cigarette in my hand for the rest of the conversation. Unfortunately, I couldn't think of anything else to say. I'm sorry I didn't say anything." Philip said, "Hey man, it's cool. Some people take time to open up," I said, trying as subtly as possible to get a look at his eyes. He didn't seem to notice. The silence between us fell again. "I think it's gonna snow soon," I said randomly, hoping to get Philip to look up. To my surprise, he did, and in the few seconds between him looking to the sky and looking back down, I got a look at one eye. Even in that one eye, I could see all I needed to. An eye that had not only seen true horror but lived with it every day. I had finally found it, but I needed to see them both, see enough that I could at least get a rough sketch of what I needed. "Yeah, I guess it is," Philip said, looking back down at the pavement. He then put his cigarette out and was about to leave. I had to get him to stay. "Hey, I know you don't like to talk about your past in front of everyone. I know it can be daunting, but why don't you just tell me for now? Maybe it will help," Philip shrugged. "I don't know," I persisted. "No, it's okay. I know this dinner around the corner. We could go there and talk. It will get you used to speaking in front of someone else. Just think of how excited Joe and the others would be if next session you're talking up a storm." Philip seemed to consider this for a moment, and I took that as my opportunity to guide him by the shoulder in the direction of the diner. Philip was surprised but went along with me with no protest. We sat down across from each other in a booth, a coffee in front of each of us. I had placed a pocket notebook in front of me and began drawing Philip. He was confused by my actions, so I did my best to calm him down. "I like to draw just as a hobby. I find it helps me distress at times. I hope you don't mind," Philip nodded, believing my lie. "So tell me about yourself," I asked. He hesitated for a moment. "I work the night shift at a grocery store. I play video games sometimes. I don't know what to say, to be honest." "Any family?" Philip felt quiet. No, they're gone. I'm so sorry." "You don't have to," I said, now feeling a pang of guilt, but I still needed more time to finish my sketch. "No, it's okay." He took a deep breath. "My brother, he always had problems. We always hoped he would turn things around. He didn't. I was sleeping when it happened. He and my parents were yelling, fighting about something. I tried to go back to sleep. I couldn't. I could see his hands shaking for a moment. I thought about telling him he could stop, but I said nothing. I heard my mother scream before her voice was cut short. I ran to the hall to grab the phone. I called the police. My brother was coming up the stairs, his hands covered in blood, holding a knife. I ran back into my room and tried to hide in my closet. My brother came in soon after and was tearing apart my room when I heard the police announcing their entrance. My brother saw me, he rushed towards me. The next all happened in an instant. The police yelled for my brother to drop the knife. He grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the closet. A shot was fired and my brother fell dead to the floor. I can still remember the empty look in his eyes while he lay there covering the carpet in blood. I don't remember much after that, just a lot of people talking to me and asking me questions. I didn't hear until I was eventually sent to stay with my grandparents. A long silence hung between us. Philip seemed surprised that he had talked this much. I wasn't sure what to say. This had gotten a lot more real than I was prepared for, and my initial feeling was that I needed to get away from this conversation. I thanked him for sharing his story and tried to offer some basic, encouraging words that meant nothing but sounded nice, before making up an excuse to leave. Philip told me he understood, but I could tell he was worried he said something wrong. I wanted to assume it was okay, he was okay, but I couldn't. I just gave some meaningless pleasantries, and for some reason decided to give him my phone number before rushing home. As soon as I got home, I began drawing eyes using the sketches I made of Philip as a reference. I worked all night drawing eye after eye, and by the time the sun came up, I had finally done it. I finished my painting for the cover and looked at it with reverence. It was perfect, true horror in the eyes of the subject. It didn't matter what monster the person in the painting was looking at. You could tell just by the eyes that it was a horror beyond comprehension. I submitted the cover to the publisher. Barely a day later, I got a call telling me that the author loved it and that it was exactly what he wanted. When the book came out, the reviews were average, but everyone noted how much the cover art drew them in and stuck with them days after they finished reading. After that, I received daily requests for more work on horror-related projects. I started drawing scenes of people facing off against horrifying walking corpses, monsters beyond comprehension, vicious, unnatural animals, people being ripped apart, and people in every state of anxiety and terror. The one thing all of these images had in common was the eyes, the true eyes of fear that I had taken from life. Whether people knew it or not, the eyes were the only truly terrifying part of the image. I could have drawn a cover with just the eyes, and it would have had the same effect as any of the other fully drawn pictures. My career was at its peak. Then one day, while working on the cover art for some independent video game, I received a call. When I saw it was Philip calling, I wasn't sure whether to answer. It had been months since that first conversation, and I didn't want to get pulled into his life more than I needed to. Despite telling myself not to, I answered the call. "Hey, sorry I haven't called in a while." Philip's voice sounded more shaky and nervous than what I remembered. "No problem, man. Life happens, I get that. How are you?" "I'm actually not great. Do you think we could meet at the dinner again?" He was trying to keep his breath stable, but was failing. "I'm sorry, I just wasn't sure who else to talk to." I hesitated. I wanted to say that I was busy and we could reschedule. I didn't. Maybe I thought I owed Philip that for what he unknowingly contributed to my work. Maybe it was just guilt. Either way, I told him yes. When I arrived at the dinner, Philip looked like he had been waiting there for over an hour, a steady rotation of coffee refills from a disinterested waitress keeping him company. I sat down across from him, trying to hide my apprehension about what my subject might say. "I've been seeing things, man," Philip said with a firm tone I've never heard from him before. Like all the uncertainty I saw in him before was gone, and all that was left was the desperation of a man who needed to be heard. It started a few weeks ago. I thought I was having bad dreams. I have bad dreams all the time, but these weren't my normal dreams. The first was some strange monster. I couldn't even make out what it was chasing me down, and in an endless hall. The next night was about a squid-like monster pulling me underwater. I kept having dreams about these horrifying monsters and things attacking every time I slept. I thought it was only when I slept, but then I started seeing them when I was awake. Something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow moving behind a door. I started keeping track of every dream I had and everything I saw. He handed a notebook to me. "I don't know what to do, man. I can't sleep. I can't stay awake. Those things are always chasing me." I felt a pit in my stomach. I knew those scenes. I made those scenes. That couldn't be true. My work couldn't have affected him. Philip never even saw my work. He didn't even know who I was. But if Philip was seeing monsters I created, the notebook he had would confirm it. With shaking hands, I opened the book, and there it was, a disruption of every picture I had drawn in the past few months, with Philip as the victim in every scene. He had been chased by rotten flesh-covered zombies, torn apart by giant creatures, haunted by shadows of the dead, burned by demons, and stalked by unknowable beings from beyond our reality. All my creations, all my fault. At the time, I needed this not to be real, that Philip was just crazy, and he had just seen my covers somewhere, and his mind made them real. I'm sure you're just stressed, you've been through a lot, and you're seeing things they aren't real. I tried to mask my fear behind an air of authority. Real or not, I can't sleep, I can't live while all this is around me. My chest hurts from my heart pounding every minute of every day. Maybe you could go to Joe for help. I'm sure she's qualified. Philip looked at me with those eyes I coveted, now full of disappointment, like I was his last hope. She said that I should check myself in somewhere. I don't know if I could do that or if they could help. At least out here I could still run away. Maybe I could outrun all this. He looked down at his cold coffee. If it's in your mind, you can't outrun that. Maybe, but I can try. Philip looked over my shoulder and got up quickly, dropping a few bills on the table. He spoke, not taking his eyes off whatever was behind me. Thanks for coming out here, but I have to go. I tried to ask him what was wrong, but he wouldn't look at me. I turned around, and as I suspected, there was nothing there. By the time I turned back, Philip was gone. That night, I sat in front of my tablet, hesitating to work. There was no way that my finishing this cover would subject Philip to another horror, but I couldn't get the thought out of my head. I told myself that he was just crazy, and I had to get back to work like nothing had happened. I decided that I would not think about the owner of the eyes more than I had to. I finished the work that night and submitted it to the client. Of course, they loved it. The next few days, I couldn't get up the gumption to work on anything. I hadn't responded to any further inquiries about more work and just tried to drown out my own thoughts about Philip. Days went by, and the flood of requests started to die down a bit. I decided I needed to get my head straight. I needed to talk to Philip again, maybe get him the help he needed, anything to get my head back on straight. I called Philip, but after several rings, I was left on voicemail. I tried calling multiple times after, and every time I got voicemail. I tried calling Joe to see if she knew where Philip was, but that was another dead end as she said he hadn't seen him either. I was at a loss. I couldn't find him. I didn't even know what his full name was, so I couldn't check to see if he was in the hospital. If he had left town and left his phone behind, I would have no way to find him, and if he was dead, I would have to read it in the obituary. The guilt was hitting me, whether in some horrifying way my work warped this man's mind or not. I still felt responsible for what happened. I still used this poor man for my own gain and didn't even give him the courtesy of learning his full name. I had used his eyes and made him see the darkest horrors imaginable. I decided I needed to do something. If I couldn't find him, I would do what I could. That day, I refused any request for horror-related work. I pivoted to children's fantasy and romance books using Philip's eyes in that art. I thought that maybe wherever he was, these wholesome positive images would cancel out the horror I subjected that man to. As expected, my career took a turn after this, with most criticisms of my work coming from people who said the scenes are composed well, but that the characters in the picture are off-putting. I knew it was the eyes that had seen horror, eyes I hoped to show something else. I don't care if people like my new work, I don't care if work dries up. I will spend every day drawing these scenes of love, of wholesome adventure, of kindness. With the eyes I have used for my own means. I don't know if he'll ever find this. I don't know if Philip is even still alive. But if he's out there, if he reads this, I want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry I manipulated you and used you for my own means. I'm sorry I cursed you. I can only hope that my new work reaches your eyes and that you can somehow someday forgive me.